Hello and good afternoon and welcome to our Tea Time SEO, where we are joined by two great speakers here. Has everyone got their tea ready? Perhaps. Very good. So we've got two great speakers here today, and we're all going to be learning about how best to use APIs, unlocking the insights. I'm sure I, like many of you, want to know a bit more about APIs and if it is available for those that are not developers. So I'm really pleased that we actually have two experts to be able to share those insights with us. So Tea Time SEO was set up at Authoritas at the end of March, and we've been running it throughout the summer as well. And we want people to join us, take a break, and learn something new. I'm SEO Joe Blogs, and I'm also here joined by Carrie Shepherd. If you have any questions for George and Jason, please leave them in the chat, and we'll be taking them in the Q&A section later today. And if you're enjoying the video, well, you will be enjoying the video, I'm sure you will. Click that like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we will be running more sessions of Tea Time SEO throughout July. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to the speakers, who will introduce themselves and give us some nice insights into APIs and how you can actually get all the data you have ever wanted. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Joe. That's my, I don't know what you'd call it, my biography, my CV. I've been in SEO since 1998, which is a long time, more than 20 years. I collect brand SERPs. I talk about brand SERPs all the time, and I can't stop talking about them. And I will talk about them again today. I teach brand SERP courses which help brands to improve their what appears when somebody searches their exact match brand name, and people to improve what appears when somebody searches their name, because Google is your new business card. I've got a groovy podcast. Search for it online. Go and have a listen. Lots of great guests. It's really good fun. And Joe asked me for something new for this CV because I keep repeating myself. So I added that I used to be a cartoon blue dog on TV, and I used to be a punk folk, which together makes poke. Whereas if it's folk punk, it makes funk, and that doesn't make sense. A punk folk double bass player in the 1990s, touring around Europe. So I went from punk folk double bass playing to being a cartoon dog, to SEO, to being a brand SERP expert. And sometimes when I really have to, I do some consulting work to make a living.
Well, it does sound like you have definitely been able to develop and build your brand or rebrand yourself. So yes, we look forward to hearing from you about the API. And over to you, George.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Joe, for inviting me to speak today. So I'm really excited to be part of this session. So, well, a few words about me. So I've been working in the SEO data industry for 4 years now, which is not much. And well, right now I do content as well as product marketing for DataForSEO, which is a company providing SEO data solutions for SEO agencies and SEO software companies. What excites me the most about this industry is the ability to work with virtually unlimited volumes of search engine and marketing related data and things like that. So yeah, that's it about me. Nothing really funny, unfortunately. So I'm passing it over to Jason, I guess. Right?
Yeah, thank you very much, George. Well, you also spent a lot of time in international schools like myself, and you grew up in different countries around the world. So that is very interesting. And I just want to say hello to everyone. We seem to have quite a lot of people not signed in, but viewing us today. So hello, welcome. Thank you very much for coming back, and drop your questions in the chat. So we'll pass over now to Jason, and we'll see you for the Q&A. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Brilliant stuff. Yeah, George, only been in the industry for 4 years, but already you know lots more about APIs than I do. I was invited along to talk about the fact that I'm not a coder, but I can still use APIs to gather data. And as you said, gathering lots of data and collecting it and putting them in databases and playing with it to see what we can find, what discoveries we can come up to is really interesting. And so I thought I'd start out. I only really use 2 APIs, and this is the first one. It's the Knowledge Graph API from Google, and it's the simplest one I could find. And it basically, you call a URL. It's quite hard to see, but at the top of that page on the left-hand side, it's a URL with get vars, where you just put your API key that you get from Google APIs platform, and then the query that you're sending in, and it will send you back what's in the knowledge graph for that string, that entity. So, for example, you could put your own name in, which is what I did. And it will show you if you are in the knowledge graph, what else is in the knowledge graph that associates with you. It's really, really, really interesting information. The knowledge graph being Google's understanding of the world. It's the machine readable encyclopedia that Google has, if you like, that helps it understand who you are and what you do. And that's fundamentally important to SEO all around. And on the right-hand side, back to the technical stuff, I've actually written a little bit of PHP script. Please, George, don't criticize it, because it's beginner's PHP script, just trying to make it work, which allows me to run a cron job, an automatic script every day, to pull all this information in and store it in the database so I can track it over time, which is what I'm doing. If we look at the next slide, you can see what that comes up with on the other side. Once you've collected this data, you can see this is my name, what the knowledge graph throws back. And you can see at the bottom there, you can see what it knows about me. It's got the description, it's got my title, it's got my official website. And above it, you can see the saliency score, i.e., the confidence score, the confidence it has that this Jason Barnard I'm asking it about is this particular Jason Barnard. And as you can see, it's gone up over the last year and a half or so. And that's because I've been working on educating Google, getting Google to really understand who I am and what I do. And that applies to brands too. It's not just people, it's brands, it's also products. So pushing this information into Google is incredibly important for your SEO, and tracking it. Tracking what Google actually knows about you is incredibly important for you to know actually if you're getting better at it, and if Google's going to make more sense of who you are and what you do. And on the right, you can see the knowledge panel that appears when you search my name. It could be a brand knowledge panel, and that basically shows that Google has understood who you are, and it's got information that it wants to share. And that's on the right-hand side on desktop. And the stuff on the right-hand side on desktop for Google is fact. So once you've got information in that right-hand side, Google's saying this is fact, and I'm very confident that this is who we're talking about, and I know what they do, or which brand we're talking about, and what they do. And once again, I'm going to repeat it again. Entity-based search, Google understanding who you are and what you do is fundamental to all SEO from today onwards. Next slide, please. The more complicated API, which is Authoritas API, which took me a lot longer to install, but it's really groovy. What it does is it allows me to ping it. I'd send in a request with a string, and I ask it what the SERP looks like, and it will send me back what Google shows for that string. So what obviously I then send in, for example, in the case of Jason Barnard, I've looked at what Google knows in its knowledge graph, and now I want to look at what it's showing me in its SERPs about me. That's what I call a brand SERP, exact match brand searches. What comes up when somebody searches your exact match brand name or your personal name. Now, back to the APIs. This one was more complicated, but it's actually not half as complicated as I thought it would be. If you've got a PHP-based server, you install Composer. I got really frightened by Composer. I thought, well, this is really weird. But all it does, it's a little package, and it takes like a second to install, that allows you to say, I want to install all these extra little functionalities around PHP that I can use. And here I just had to install Authoritas, which is the new ASEO API auth key auth, and Guzzle, which is the one below it, where it connects to Guzzle. Sorry, right at the top, Guzzle HTTP client. And that's just a way for PHP, my server, to communicate with Authoritas' server, and that they talk to each other in the same language. And that little bit of code is actually very simple once you've got it installed. So what I would say from an API point of view, I'm sure George has got much more complicated examples than this. This is the next level up, but it still isn't so complicated that somebody with good sense and Google, I mean, I searched how to install Composer, how to set up Guzzle, and how to set up Authoritas just by looking on Google, and everything came up and there were solutions to all my problems, and it was actually much less painful. It was more painless, less painful than I thought it would be. And now let's look at the data. I've been collecting brand SERP data through Authoritas' really wonderful SERP API for a couple of years now. And I collect it all, put it in a database, sort through it, and then I can look at this and I can say, all right, on the average brand SERP, we have 8.18 blue links, 1.38 elements, rich elements in the left rail, that's the left-hand side, and 0.89 on average in the right rail, which is the fact rail, as I mentioned earlier. And so on the right, you can see a representation of a very typical brand SERP. So I can start to build a representation of what a brand SERP looks like, and I can do this by industry. I can do it by type of rich element. I call them rich elements rather than SERP features because for me, they're just elements within the SERP that are richer than those boring old blue links. And interestingly, although almost all you've got 0.89, on average elements in the right-hand rail, that factual rail. 1 in 3 brand SERPs have nothing, and that means Google knows nothing about them that it's willing to put out there as fact, and that's a real pity. And something, if you don't have anything in the right rail for your brand, you should be working on it. If we look at the next slide, we can also see that I can break it down by rich element types, and that's what I've been doing. I've been looking at how many brand SERPs have video boxes, how many have image boxes, how many have rich site links, which I count as a rich element, because they're big and they're sexy and they really help everybody and they help the users get to your site. So looking through this, it's for me, I'm tracking these brands, and you'll see in a moment you can track your brand on the tool that I've built to see what's appearing, how it looks to people, how accurate, how positive, and how convincing it is. And if we look at this next slide, we can see what it all comes down to. These two APIs together bring us this, which is basically tracking and measuring brand SERPs so that we can improve them. We can make what appears when Google searches your brand name look better and better and better, make it more positive, more accurate, and more convincing. And I've got 2 measurements, one of which is the quality of that brand SERP, which includes sentiment, includes how many rich elements there are, how much space is taken up, and then control. How much of it do I actually control? And in this case, it's my brand SERP, and the quality is up there. It's got an A, and the SERP control, I've got an A because I control most of that brand SERP. I've been working on this for 7 years. And that gives you an idea of how much work it is to actually get control of your brand SERP and make it qualitatively up to scratch. Next slide is the tool that you can go along, and it's free. And it uses these 2 APIs that I've mentioned earlier on. And you can track your brand, your personal brand, your product, in fact, any entity. Unfortunately, now we can see the URL. It's completely free. You can track yours, you can track your clients, you can track your competitors. It doesn't really matter. I'm asking you to add as many as you can because I've got 75,000 at the moment, but I'd like to spread that out and get more brands so that I can learn more and I can push more, collect more data, learn more about this and get us as a community, the digital marketing community, more knowledge about how Google represents brands in its SERPs when people search for the exact match name. Thank you very much. George, I'll pass over to you with your more complicated APIs.
Thank you very much, Jason. Wow, that was really impressive set of use cases. Never actually thought about this, like doing this for brand searches. Wow. Yeah, so I totally agree with Jason about the importance of using APIs in terms of both the volumes, the diversity of data, and the insights that you can extract from them. So I'm going to cover yet another chunk of marketing APIs, and also specifically those that Google has kindly shared with the community. It doesn't happen this often. So I'm going to talk about Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and Google Adwords APIs, namely. So now probably you all know what these tools provide in terms of intel, and you probably use them every other day or maybe even every day. However, in my experience, and well, to my big surprise too, not a lot of people, especially in the marketing space, know how to interact with these APIs to, extract, aggregate, and analyze data. Now, this is actually genuinely a massive topic, and unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go through all the details. So I'll try to share some tips on how to avoid some obvious and, well, not so obvious bottlenecks. And I'll also walk you through some of the easy ways on how to start getting data. If you, just like me, have little to no coding skills, yeah, I'm not a coder by craft, no. So basically, it's going to be a brief roundup of some solutions and interesting things I discovered when I just started looking into these APIs, and I really tried to make it as easy as possible. So I think it should be really useful even for those of you who never made a single API call. So can we jump to the next slide? Yes. Okay, so let's start with Google Analytics API. So first of all, well, if you don't know where to start, you do want to register an account with the developer console. This will take just, a few minutes, maybe like 15 minutes, but there's no way you can use any Google API without it. So creating a project, setting up an API, generating and adding credentials. This is overall a really wonderful platform, and it has practically everything you need to start using these APIs. So now you'll quickly find out that Google Analytics API is actually a sort of umbrella term for several different APIs. There is this real-time API, multi-channel funnel API, and the core reporting API, which allows you to basically access your report data programmatically from Google Analytics. So this core reporting API is, well, in my humble opinion, the easiest to work with, and it has really a lot of use cases. So then the first tricky thing about configuring this API, and probably, well, any other Google API, is generating your API key. So on the first screenshot, that's the one in the background. Yes, there is a screenshot, yeah. So there is a window for adding credentials. That's how it looks like. This is in fact quite straightforward. Developer console, well, it will walk you through the whole process, but things can and will get really tricky when you try to set up HTTP headers, which Google requires for making an authorized query, in case you're building an application. So we've actually run into this stuff several times, and it would have been so much easier if we knew as a playground for that. So with this playground, you can check what went wrong with your auth authorization. It's pretty easy to use. Just Google it. You'll find it quickly. And it definitely saves a lot of time. So another obvious but extremely useful time saver is Google's quick start guides. Please go through them. Do go through them. There are also client libraries for different programming languages if you're learning how to code, and you'll need them. So you can also easily find them in Google's developer docs. No big deal. Okay, can we move on to the next slide, please? Yes, okay. So after setting up the authorization and reading all the manuals, you'll certainly want to try building your first query, right? So the first tip here is about getting your IDs, be it your property ID or table ID. So they are essential for getting data from any Google API, and Google Analytics API in particular. So you can find all this information in your Google Analytics account dashboard. But, well, it might take some time to connect the dots, to find where you can find all these IDs. Now Google has another great resource where you can retrieve all this data. So just go to the Google Analytics demos, right? Yeah, and select tools, and then there is Account Explorer. So there you'll find everything your account information has across all your properties and all your views. So there is another thing that should be really useful, but you should be really careful about it. So it's about combining all the metrics and dimensions, as well as sorting and filtration parameters. So there are certain conditions that might or might not work. For example, if you try to retrieve data for transactions per second, right? Pretty popular. So that's a typical e-commerce conversion rate. So if you want to combine it with item quantity or item revenue, so these two things, they just won't work together because, well, transaction is happening per session, right? And item is actually a part of the transaction. So because not every session has a transactions, well, these metrics are a different scope, right? And they won't work together. Now you obviously want to prevent that from happening. And again, Google offers a great tool to help you out. So it's called Dimensions and Metrics Explorer. And by using it, you well, get all these dimensions and metrics where you can combine them and see if they're compatible with each other. So you can also find it in Google Analytics demos and tools. So one more thing, you probably know that sampling in Google Analytics is pain, right? It is pain. And it's especially so if you love segmenting your data and if you have a lot of data to process. So Google Analytics API has a parameter. Not everybody knows how to work with that, but it exists. So this parameter helps you minimize and balance all this speed accuracy issues. So I recommend using the higher precision parameter instead of the default parameter because, well, obviously accuracy is more important than speed when we are talking about marketing data. But otherwise, you can use the faster parameter. So just replace this higher precision with the faster, and it'll work. So now you can actually easily try it with the Google Analytics Query Explorer, which you can see on the screen. I don't know if you can actually see anything, but yeah, that's the Query Explorer. So that's a sort of playground which you can use to test your queries, but also you can get your Google Analytics data from it. If you want to run reports occasionally, if you want to extract your data not on a regular basis, so you don't need to, you know, do it every day, so you can do it from there too. So yeah, the big downside is you can't streamline a process. There is no easy way to do that. Okay, so next, it's about integration with Google Sheets. So if your primary way of storing and processing data is Google Sheets, which is a case quite often, so there is actually a much easier way to get your custom Google Analytics reports. Google provides this official add-on for Google Analytics. You can find it, just Google it. This is very user-friendly and it doesn't take any coding skills or whatsoever. So there is really no special tricks except, well, maybe for the segments and the filtration parameters, which again you can get using the Query Explorer. You can click please. Just there is another picture. Yes, so that's the Query Explorer. So you can get all your parameters by just selecting them from the drop-down menu. So you actually set them up through the Google Analytics user interface, and then you can find them there. Okay, so let's go to the next API. Okay. Okay. No, that's something different. Next one. Okay. So the next API we'll go through is Search Console. So its setup and authentication are fairly similar to that of Google Analytics. So there's really nothing special to highlight here. But what sets it apart is the row limit. So in Google Analytics Report API, you have a limit of 10,000 rows per query, which is twice as many compared with its web interface. But with Search Console API, you can get up to 25,000 rows, if I remember that correctly, for 16 months of data. Yes, I believe they announced it last year. Previously, you could only fetch 5,000 rows. So what they haven't improved, however, is the filter per dimension. So just like it is in the Search Console UI, you can only set one filter per one dimension. This actually drove the team crazy when we started using it. And well, we couldn't find any workarounds, so there is nothing that I know of, unfortunately. So now what can really help you to get it off the ground is another Google Sheet add-on and the Query Explorer. So what you should keep in mind, though, so the add-ons, they are not official, and I think they have a quite limited functionality. So those that I tried would only let me get the data from the performance tab. You can't really go beyond that. So you won't get your mobile performance or sitemaps data using these add-ons. Then again, what I really like about Google Developer Platform is the Query Explorer. So the one for Search Console will let you extract all the data and also has this tricky system that suggests parameters for the request body, and it also converts your request from JSON into curl, HTTP, JavaScript. Yeah, so it's really useful. So I don't know if you can see anything there on the screenshot, but there is the request that will return page and device dimensions for queries on our DataForSEO website. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, move on to the next slide, please. All right. So now let's look into one of the more complicated APIs. So Google Adwords itself is a pretty complex system, right? And the API reflects this only too well. I don't want to say it is bad and that you shouldn't be using that. No, it's extremely powerful in terms of generating keyword ideas, getting search volumes, and other data-heavy SEO essentials. However, you won't find any add-ons and query explorers for this one. And I think here you could really use some help from your techie friends and teammates. So yeah, now a few tips. So to begin with, here you'll need a developer token authorized by Google. Unlike Analytics or Search Console APIs, Google won't let you use Adwords API without, additional information about your company and what you need it for. So you'll have to fill in the application form in the API Center and wait for Google's approval. So you can access it only through a Google Ads MMC. Yeah. So the process itself is really tricky. We got our first token from like the third or maybe the fourth attempt. Please remember that you should read this Learn More About Permissible Use document before you type anything into the, how it's called, intended use field. So there is this intended use, and then there is a hyperlink to this permissible use document. You do want to read it. But the biggest issue that you are likely to run into is rate limits, right? So this rate limits exceeded error is really, really frustrating when you need to generate keyword ideas or say get metrics for a big list of keywords. And you know, these keywords lists, they are always gigantic, especially if you put them onto spreadsheets. So Search Console API's rate limit for the basic access, which is what you'll most likely be working with. So your rate limit will be 10,000 operations and 1,000 report downloads per day. You get only that. Well, it might seem like a lot, but well, in reality, it's just never the case. So you can sort of hack these limitations by setting up multiple accounts. You can also split the keyword list to reduce the number of items. Yeah, that's what you see on the code snippet. Yeah, that will do exactly that. However, if you're building an app or have plans to use this API publicly, now can we get back to the previous one? There is something really important. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to build an app, so you need a really big volumes of data. I think it's worth looking into third-party APIs. So you can use, I don't know if Authoritas has the keywords data API, but there are like multiple of them. So with these APIs, you can get all the keyword research and keyword data from Google Ads with, well, virtually no limits. Yeah, and for some of them, price isn't that high either. Okay, so let's get back to the topic. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm running out of time, it seems, yeah. Okay. So the last set of tips is about building all these APIs and bundling them together. Now this is a huge topic, and while I'm running out of time, so let's just cut the chase here. So, well, the most obvious way to do that is with Google Data Studio. I believe, well, most of you know what that is, and maybe you use it regularly for building custom reports, right? So this tool makes it really easy to connect all the APIs we discussed and also visualize and analyze the data. By the way, I recently found out it's possible to connect Google Analytics to Power BI too. So you want to go to the Get Data dialog, if I'm not mistaken. So in this dialog, you can easily connect to external data sources, including Google Analytics. So they have a ready-made connector. It's hidden under the Other Sources tab, so it's not really easy to find it. So if you're dealing with big volumes of data, and if you have a Google Analytics 360 account, you should try using BigQuery. It's actually included in your account subscription anyways. So I can't say I have a lot of experience with this one, but well, a lot of our customers, they do. And I must say they're quite satisfied with it. So basically, what it does, it allows you to connect your data to any reporting tool. It can be Tableau, it can be Data Studio, Fine Report, so pretty much anything. So with Google Analytics 360 account, you can see your analytics data in BigQuery in raw analytics tables. So it's a no-brainer, really. So, however, if you want to connect to other applications for visualizing the data, for instance, so you'll need to transform the raw data into something that's a little bit more convenient. There are a few ways to do that. For example, you can enter a custom query into the tool. So in Google Data Studio, it's one of the options when you select the BigQuery connector, and in Tableau, there is this new custom SQL option. So you can also use custom queries to connect BigQuery to Google Sheets. So I won't talk about how to write queries themselves. This will take a lot of time. So my last tip for today is to use a Google Cloud Query interface to build and test your custom queries. So that's, again, an awesome tool which allows you to automate the process by scheduling your queries and setting up notifications. That's actually what you can see on the screen. So, all right, so thank you very much. Hope it didn't get too boring for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George, and thank you very much, Jason. There's a lot of information there that everyone can really take on board and implement straight away. You went into a lot of detail, so thank you for that. I'll pass over to Carrie for any questions.
Great, thank you. I think we have time just for one question quickly. So Jason, how you talked a bit about knowledge graphs. How do you get into the knowledge graph to get data out of it?
How do I get into the knowledge graph to get data out? How do I get myself into the knowledge graph so Google knows who I am?
So any data, yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, what was really interesting is I started doing it 7 years ago. And it took me quite a long time to get anything in there at all. And I've been doing experiments the last 2 or 3 months to see how easy it is to actually educate. I call it educating Google. I like the idea of educating Google like we're educating a child. And it basically comes down to providing factual information and getting multiple corroborations from trusted, reliable sources so that Google believes what you're saying, just like a child wouldn't believe one person, but it would tend to believe a mother or a father more than the local baker or the guy down the street sitting on the corner on the bench. And so, in fact, as time goes by, 2 things happen. One is I've learned more, so I can do it more easily. But the other is that Google's getting better at using other sources than Wikipedia and Wikidata, which is very important, because actually getting into the knowledge graph used to mean having a Wikipedia page, and now you don't need one. You can actually get into the knowledge graph quite easily without a Wikipedia page. And I also recently got something into the knowledge graph without even using Wikidata, which doesn't sound particularly impressive, but I think it is. And the nice thing about the Kalicube tracking tool with Authoritas and WordLift and the Google API is that once you've got something into the knowledge graph, you can track how solidly Google has understood and is willing to throw that information back at you, which is what the API is really good for. I love doing this stuff. You should never ask me questions like that because I go on and on and on and on and on.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that's everything we have time for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Back over to Joe.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks very much, George and Jason. There's a lot of information there. And Jason and George will probably ask you some more questions across LinkedIn for you, George, and Jason for Twitter. Just we have a few ourselves just about how long to get into the API, into SERPs API, and just other things to keep the conversation going. I think we have quite a few people watching, but I think everyone's a bit shy to maybe ask the questions. We have someone has just asked, I'll pass over to you, Carrie. Someone's just asked something in the chat.
Yeah, we have a quick question for George. Is it easier to connect third-party API for big volumes than try to hack Google's one?
Well, it pretty much depends on the API, because there are certain data that you just can't get off of Google. You know, if we are talking about the Authoritas SERP API or other APIs, I mean, DataForSEO has SERP API too, so there are really a lot of them. So you can't find a Google API just for that. You can extract knowledge graphs using the API that Jason was talking about. So this is possible, but getting this data, getting vast volumes of data on SERP features on Google pages, well, it's impossible to do with any Google API. So
Okay.
in terms of, I think the question was more about the keywords, right? About the Adwords API. So with Adwords API, if you want to use this API internally within your team, the token authorization and the integration process would be quite simple because you won't need a lot of data. However, if you need a lot of data, you'll want to use third-party tools because they're really easy to work with and they don't have any limitations. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's all we have time for. Thank you guys for joining. Back over to Joe.
Yes, thank you very much again, Jason and George, giving up your time and sharing those insights. We will probably tagging you on Twitter and LinkedIn for some other questions. So
Super.
if anybody does have anyone, please then follow George's more on LinkedIn, but you can catch him here on Twitter, and Jason's really all over Twitter. And if you can, as in a nice way. So.
Yeah, no, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see my knowledge graph and brand SERP experiments exploding in your Twitter box because I do experiments and I have at least one result every day and I just can't wait to share it. But it's also a good way for me to keep track of the experiments and how they're progressing, because then I can look back through it by date and look at the things that I found in the morning. And I kind of get up in the morning and I look up lots of stuff and then post it straight away and get overexcited.
Yeah, well, I think it can be very good to be overexcited. So that's a classic example of what you just said, that, you know, you're testing different things to see what works. And that's the thing, SEO is always developing.
Yes.
You know, so we will tag you on, so feel free to ask questions. Also, Jason, we ran out of time here, but you can join us next Thursday. We are going to be talking about competitive analysis, so really about, you know, a competitive audit template, whether that's for local SEO, whether that's for larger businesses. We have 3 people confirmed so far. We may even have a 4th. It's Julia, Sophie, and Nikki who will be with us next Thursday at 4 p.m. And what'd you say, Jason? You raised your hand.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to come along because I think before they've even spoken, what they should add to the audit template is the competitor's brand SERP and what's on that. So if they don't mention it, can you mention add your brand SERP to the competitor audit template?
You come next Thursday and
brilliant.
Add it in the chat.
You're a genius.
We'll just add it in, be the audience member. So
stupid.
We'll have 3 people. We may have a 4th. So we're going to have a lot of insights for next Thursday. So mark that in your calendar, 4 p.m. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you, everyone that has joined. And if you have any questions, as I said, we'll be tagging Jason on Twitter, George on LinkedIn. Please ask your questions there. Thank you very much, Carrie, George, and Jason. And we'll see the rest of you soon.
Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Joe, Carrie, George, and Authoritas. Wonderful people and company.
Thanks very much, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.
See you.